This is Dead Serious, a show about short horror stories worthy of discussion. I'm Dead Palette, and you can't nerf my spirit. Today we're going to be taking a look at Fleming Storage Unit number 119, Atrociously Alone, written by Skylofter. Let's get right into it. I finally went there, to the storage unit. I arrived when I told the man I would on October 13th. I needed some closure, but as I finally found my grandparents' unit, number 119, I shook. What if what I found in there raised more questions, and why do I find myself caring about these things after so long? I quickly inserted the key and peered inside. The first thing I saw was a picture of my old house. After looking at all the contents, I sat down on the floor of the truck and started to write. Okay, so what we're getting here is that our narrator has gone through some sort of trauma, and they're looking for closure. And the storage units being shut down has forced them into action when they didn't want to take action before. So it's unclear what they're looking for closure for and what they're looking for answers for. So hopefully that will get unpacked as we read more. I need to write this all down before I leave. I finally understand what's been happening all this time. I need to write this down, or these thoughts will overwhelm me. Well, if this is a story, the most logical place to start at the beginning. I grew up in a small town in northern Ontario where the winters got down to negative 40 degrees Celsius and the summers over 150 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a weird place when it came down to weather. But when it really came down to it, that was the most interesting thing about the town. Being the only child of two parents who both averaged $125,000 a year had its advantages, though. It had its disadvantages, too, of course. Not that most people really had that much sympathy for them. My parents were almost never said town, whether being out on trips with their friends or on trips for work. In school, I was the class loner. Not by choice, of course. I tried to make friends a lot of the times, but I ended up being stereotyped as the rich bitch and turned away. It hurt at first, but soon I found I liked being alone. Okay, so what we're dealing with here is someone who is lonely, presumably a woman, if people are stereotyping them as a rich bitch. You don't normally stereotype men that way. And we're kind of getting a little bit of clunky writing, that I'm kind of willing to forgive because we're getting a lot of valuable information. So the clunkiness is kind of second. That's something that can be worked out. The thing that's functioning well here is that, they're from a town in Ontario. That's cool. Most Americans don't know about that. They have wildly different temperatures, and they're saying that that's the most interesting thing about it. So it's kind of a bland, boring place, that they come from an affluent background, and that their parents were kind of neglectful. Presumably that's why the grandparents are mentioned here. They probably had a more pronounced effect on this child's life than the parents did. Alright, so good stuff here. Let's press on. I even stopped going to school after a while because my parents never cared enough about my life. Then why should I? My days mostly consisted of spending money from my parents' bank account, which had so much money that most of the time they didn't even notice I took some out. With that, I would play video games, watch movies, and basically just lounged around for days. It was during that time that I realized the true use of human interaction. The phrase, humans are social creatures, basically says that we need to socialize to stay alive. Very true. But the true reason is for a cure for boredom. I had it good, I really did, and even managed to make friends during my teens. Since the law doesn't really matter at this point, and I really doubt a fat cop Daniel is reading this, my friend basically, friend is in quotes, so, it's being facetious, basically used me for weed money. But I did not care since, well, that didn't just shit off a rumor that spread around 6 years about my parents and their line of work. I'm a little confused as to what that means, and yeah, it is a small town where everyone knows everyone, but do you really know the name of the cop? The fat cop Daniel? I don't necessarily think you do. Even though I saw my parents never check up or come home, they usually had called or had one of their assistants call at least once a month. Ooh, so that's very little interaction with your parents. It took me over a year to realize something was wrong. I didn't get a call or a letter or an email at all from them in that time. I quickly realized that there was no longer any money going into the bank account. I tried contacting several people, including my parents, but with no luck, until one day when they knocked on my door. Okay, so it seems as though the parents passed away in some sort of accident or something, inexplicably, and it took our narrator at least a month for there to be something going on, for them to realize something was going on. The aspect of humans are social creatures and they cure people from boredom is very true. I remember in middle school and in parts of high school, I didn't have, it wasn't that I wasn't able to make friends. I just kind of isolated myself, buried myself in anime, kind of got addicted to that. And I was bored all the time, just constantly bored. And, it was because I felt that I needed to, indulge in those things. This person is kind of having a similar problem where they're using money from their parents to kind of distance themselves from their feelings of loneliness and whatnot. Let's press on, though. I think that there are some problems there, but I do like the overall tone of this. It's very much speaking to a relatability that I think is valuable. At the door was a man who looked just as fed up with life as I thought someone would be because of their line of work he was in. That is a massive, massive run-on sentence. And we have a giant paragraph here, too, that I'm already going to say should probably be 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 paragraphs instead of 1. Hi, my name is Steve from Duganers. I'm here about your parents. Duganers? Duganeers? I'm not sure. I'm here about your parents. He went through the motions of telling me how they died in a car crash after being heavily intoxicated. It was one of the longest days of my life, for me mostly because I didn't care about anything he was saying, until he said I would have to move out of this house and had to go live with my grandparents in America. In my father's will, he left everything to the company, including the house and all the money. Luckily, being slightly smart, and mostly because of my friend asked me, I had about 20 grand in cash. Oof, you are a rich kid in this story. While they went around and appraised everything, I went and got a debit card made and put the cash in it. Then, after weeks of paperwork and waiting, I was on the flight to Haver, Montana, United States of America, world, and possibly a giant marble in an alien's marble sack. That is some cute writing. I was about to shit on that of going to you don't need to put the one there. Haver, Montana, United States. I'm like, is this an alien? And then zooming out of possibly a marble and an alien's. Yeah, that's great. I like that. I had someone fly me there and someone to pick me up and drive me to my grandparents' house. But once I got there, they basically kicked me out of the car. They kicked me out of the car and sped off. As I got the first look at the astounding house, I started to notice a lot of things at once. The first was that someone had an obsession with gnomes. Lining the walkway, there was at least 50 gnomes. Jesus! It really annoyed me how there were 32 on one side and 18 on the other. That's weird that you know exactly the number, but I get the weirdness of that. Small details like that always made me mad. The second thing was how big the house was. Of course, still smaller than my old house, but still considerably larger than the houses around. You could also tell it was an old house, mostly from the tower that was on top of it. There was a literal watchtower that was just sitting on the top of the house. The third and possibly most important thing I noticed was that my parents had 4 Jurassic World chia pets growing in their front step, on their front step. After getting past all of the horrors, I stepped into the house. The first thing I noticed was how much mail was sitting on the floor and how dusty the house was. I called out their names but got no response. I was a bit creeped out at this point, but I went away and saw the SNES connected to the TV. It looked a bit dusty, but it worked perfectly fine. So for the next 3 hours, I tried my best to beat Super Mario World, got stuck on Banana Bridge, like always, gave up, and played some Mario Kart. Ladies and gentlemen, that was 1 paragraph. That shouldn't be 1 paragraph. That should be 4 paragraphs. Maybe 3. That's a big crunchy thing to read through. But all of that's working, all of that's fine. It's nice details, really getting us invested. The bit about Banana Bridge, these kind of things are going to stick out when you're traumatized, really confused, feeling emotionally dead because, your parents died, but your parents didn't give a shit about you. So, you feel bad that you don't feel bad, that kind of thing. I like all of this. Now it was now getting dark. So I went and turned on some lights and looked for a place to lie down. I could wait a second. Is it, they're going through this house. The grandparents aren't there. They're waiting for their grandparents to show up. They've been told their grandparents are here. Is the twist going to be that there are no grandparents? Because that would be pretty interesting, actually. Man, if that's not what this story is, I might write that myself. That's pretty cool. Okay. I could tell easily which one of my grandparents' rooms and which one was the guest room, and by one room lacking of cat paintings. So I went to sleep. I tried over the course of the next few weeks to find out where they went, but my neighbors said that no one had lived in that house for over 20 years. Okay, so that is what's happening. That's a pretty cool crux of a story. I'm really invested in that. Shrugging it off as those stupid assistants just not caring enough to check if my grandparents were still alive, I then started making the house more my own. After 2 weeks of stepping over it, I finally decided to check the mail that had been lying there for God knows how long. Most were overdue bills, and one was from the town saying the tower was too dangerous. Why am I having problems reading? The one that really caught my eye was the one from the local storage unit. It was a letter saying that due to some unfortunate events, I had to go clear out their unit number 119. Something about a murder. Looking more at the letter, I realized it was actually a screenshot of an email that someone kindly took for my grandparents, probably because they don't have email. Okay, so I was about to point that out as a plot hole of an email was sent out, not a letter, and this rectifies that. That's pretty cool. So that means that there is someone else out there trying to do caretaker stuff for the grandparents, I guess. Someone looking out for them. Let's press on, because I'm invested in this mystery. As it was October 12th, I went down to the office and explained my situation. I was able to provide proof of identity, and they gave me all I needed to get in after a good couple of hours of explaining. With key and paperwork in hand, I headed back home, still hearing him tell me to be there on the 13th. I went back and continued my project I had been working on for a while. At this time, I'd still found no way to get up to the tower above. There were no attics and no secret tunnels that I could find, and I did pull every book off the shelf. Since I was out away and honestly fed up, I went and got a sledgehammer. Eyeing it up from outside and many holes in the ceiling later, I got lucky. I hit into a hallway which led to a ladder on both ends. One that led downwards through the wall and into a secret hatch in the floor, and the other up to the tower. I had always wondered why there was a welcome mat in the middle of the hallway. As soon as I got into the hallway, the smell hit me. There was no better way of describing the smell other than rancid. I went off the ladder with one hand covering my mouth. I had been trying to get up here for weeks now and wasn't letting some mold stop me now. So possibly the grandparents are dead in the attic, maybe? While climbing the ladder, I soon hit the top, and there was a small hatch that had some kind of locking mechanism on it. It was easily bypassed through, as it was basically just sliding a bar across. I noticed, though, that it would have been very difficult, if not impossible, to unlock it from above, so I left the hatch open. Did they get locked in? Also, to let out the smell, as I stepped through the hatch, I noticed the tower was more of a storage area than a tower. Well, it could be both, couldn't it? There were boxes strewn around everywhere up here. All around me were familiar faces, worn out. All around me were stone walls. Then I saw them. 2 very decomposed bodies lying side by side. It seemed they had somehow gotten themselves locked up here and had been too feeble to break out. I assumed they were my grandparents, but that was soon confirmed as I read my grandpa's driver's license from his wallet in his pocket. It was hard to feel bad for someone who you never met, but it says this way. This was a terrible way to go. Locked in with no escape and forced to slowly starve to death, I started to leave, but noticed a box labeled Duganiers LLC. Okay, so this is in reference to the person who showed up at the door to tell our narrator that there was, an accident with the parents. And again, this is confirming what I thought, but I'm wondering if we're going to get an explanation as to why the parents were in this weird, elaborate tower that it seemed that the township was upset about and, people were saying was unsafe. I grabbed the box and went downstairs. I closed the hatch and put a makeshift cover over the hole. I planned on calling the police, but then I would have had no place to go, and since I was basically squatting in the house for about a month, it wouldn't have looked good. Yeah, that's kind of a weird scenario to be in. So instead, I turned on some music and looked through the box. Most of it was letters sent to Duganiers with complaints or something of that. A couple lawsuits and way more death threats than I thought necessary. Then there was something interesting. Let me judge that, not you. There were letters going back and forth between my dad and my grandpa. Of course, I only had my dad's side of the letter, so I assumed it was going back between them. They were mostly sent over 20 years, although some were sent more recently, and the most recent one only a year ago. In them, Dad was complaining about his health and how he had joined a martial arts program that he had met Mom there. The program was called Bellator MMA. Ooh, now we're getting, I'm invested in this. What's going to happen? Why are we getting into MMA fighting all of a sudden? He and Mom had spent considerable time there. My grandpa, he told my grandpa how Mom wanted kids and he didn't, so they settled on adoption. Wait a second. I want to do a quick Bing search and see if Bellator MMA was a thing 20 years ago. According to Wikipedia, Bellator MMA was founded in 2008. So there's a plot hole because it's impossible that this is occurring 20 years ago. 20 years hasn't passed as of the events of the Fleming Storage Units, happening. So there you have it. this is something to easily get around because you could just instead say it was some sort of other MMA corporation. Could be UFC, could be a training camp for the UFC, or, a no holds barred organization back when people called MMA no holds barred, that kind of thing. So there's that, but there is a plot hole that I discovered. Anyway, he told my grandpa how mom wanted kids and that he didn't want any, so they settled on adoption. Okay, so we have a little adopted baby here. That hit me hard since I never knew. But to be honest, there were very little things that could faze me at this time. Since I'm not related to them, that means I've been stealing their money all this time. And that made me happy, even for just a little bit. Yeah, that's kind of the thing, is this story is very much so talking about a sort of detachment, like a nihilistic detachment that I think a lot of young people in America are having now, feeling as though their connection to their parents is like this weird thing, and they don't necessarily have the desire to, spread the genes and continue on. People aren't having kids anymore. And so it kind of feels like this weird thing where you're selfish and it's all me, but at the same time, it's like you're not getting the emotional nourishment to make you want to develop into anything more than me. And this story is really hitting onto a fundamental truth about culture and young people nowadays. For better or for worse, this story just seems to be not necessarily making commentary on it, just saying, man, a lot of young people feel emotionally dead inside and detached and very confused and just kind of like they're these selfish money pits who have, nothing else to do. I'm really a fan of that. But let's press on. He started complaining that it was much easier when he didn't have a kid. He flat out told my grandpa that the biggest thing he ever did was buy that house in the middle of nowhere. It was like he started a whole new life. In the last letter in the pile, he said that he had an even bigger plan, though, that left me extremely curious, although for reason even unknown to me. Reasons unknown should be, I think. Taped to the bottom was a posted note that said, "Remember that the rest of the letters are in the new unit I bought. I went to bed that night crying for the first time in a long time." So they're feeling something again. It was a weird feeling, yeah. Anything, really. I called the police the next morning and left a tip about the tower. Then I headed out to the unit. There were people mingling around, taking stuff out, probably locals, I thought to myself. Yeah, that's a logical thing. I found my locker way at the back and went inside. I found the other letters and a bunch of other stuff. Apparently my grandparents really liked guns because there were an array of guns, from handguns to semi-automatics hanging on the wall. Handguns are also semi-automatic, just FYI. One thing that's been funny about this experiment, this project, is there's been a lot of writers from different parts of the world that aren't used to American gun culture, and the fact that we geographically put a gun store right next to it has like encouraged people to think about guns. And they're kind of like phrasing stuff in weird ways, like handguns and semi-automatics. And it's like, what you're trying to say is assault rifles, right? Or rifles, rather, even more broadly. He had the permits and everything for them. I wasn't entirely sure how that would legally affect me. Most people aren't. But I decided I would figure that out later. Well, while in America, I guess, I always did want to visit Rome. That's a weird way to phrase that, but I know what you're getting at. You're getting at the phrase, like, when in Rome. So when in America, own guns. I bought a move-in truck, should be moving truck, with the last of my money. I grabbed all the stuff, put it in the back, and then locked up the unit and drove the truck way past my house with the police cars surrounding it. I went into the abandoned parking lot just to have some peace. Then I went into the back and read the letters, and is where I am now. I had just read the letters of my dad saying how he would fake his own death, pretend to sell the house, and just ship me off somewhere randomly. Oh my God. Oof. Wow. That is a powerful ending right there. He wanted to get rid of me so badly that he even said he tried to kill me multiple times. It all became clear what I had to do once I found the semi-automatic rifles hanging in the unit. That is, well, good luck getting into Canada with those. That is why I'm writing this, I guess, to let everyone know why more than likely my father's company is a scene of mass murder, and more than likely I am neither dead or taken prisoner. This is the first time I have felt anything for a while. I mean, after all, I wanted to go out with a bang. Wow. That is, man, this is great. The title, scrolling back up to the beginning, title, Fleming Unit number 119, Atrociously Alone. Wonderful. This person is cosmically alone. It's getting to that nihilism I was talking about, really hitting on those emotions. And our narrator, I highly doubt our author. Our narrator is coming to a very morbid conclusion because of what it is that they have been faced with. They've been faced with no biological family, and the family that they do have doesn't act like family, and what's more, they didn't want him. And so they've just kind of been on this, emotionally dead roller coaster, and now that they've felt something again, it's all coming out at once, and in a very destructive manner. I think about how I would react to the situation. My reaction would be, I got money out of this, I guess, and now I'm my own person and I'm free to do what I want. But our narrator feels slighted and feels as though nothing means anything and is willing to take human life because of that. They can sit there in front of, two dead people who got locked into this tower and feel nothing for them. That's pretty crazy. It shows you something about the mental state of this narrator. This is a great story. I like every detail of it. There are parts of this that are significantly clunky that really need a second draft to pull everything together. But I hope that my enthusiasm for this story is really bore out. I felt that the story was going to end with the note of, the grandparents locked themselves up there and they locked themselves up there for some reason. And that's what the ending is going to be. Instead of getting an explanation for that, which we don't necessarily need, they could just be eccentric people. Instead, we get this other twist about the father being this weird, neglectful person who never wanted children to begin with. I'm trying to go back and read the beginning of this because it seems that there's a bit of a contradiction there where it says, I need to write all this down before I leave to finally understand. Trying to see it quickly, inserted the key and peered inside. The first thing I saw. So I sit down on the floor of the truck and started to write. Okay, so that all matches up. Quite a fan of this story. Had a great time with it. Favorite pasta of Skylofter, the author, is Smile Dog, which is a bit weird. Maybe that's for like it's some sort of nostalgic reason or something like that. Because this is a very Ashcan story, very much so evocative of the kind of creepypasta that I'm a fan of. Really fits well in universe. Quite a bang-up story. Definitely leave some comments below with some feedback on the story, how you feel it could be improved, and constructive criticism. And with that, I'm going to plug the Fear Fiction podcast. Please check that out if you haven't yet, where myself, Slime Beast, and Abysme read and critique short internet fiction of all stripes when it comes to horror. We read some fan fiction, some SCP, some RPC, all of that kind of stuff. Let's talk about our sponsor of the day. Our sponsor is Duganeers LLC. Duganeers LLC. I have no idea what they do,